My name is Eric Z. I run 2 restaurants, Wen and 886 in New York. It's where I get to stick my own style of Taiwanese food. But you wouldn't really come to eat at my restaurant if you're looking for something that's authentic or traditional in that sense. Because everything I do is kind of like a cross between what I grew up remembering in Taiwan and my own experiences living in New York for the better part of the last decade. Let me give you an example.
So, pig's blood cake, 猪血糕, seen in Taiwan everywhere. It's using blood as a coagulant to bind rice. That's as simple as it is. Throughout the years, it has changed and evolved. In Taiwan, you can eat it many of ways. There is deep fried, there is steamed, and then with a little bit of peanut powder and cilantro and hot sauce. Really endless ways of eating it. And it is very difficult to introduce pig's blood cake to New York. I made a little bit of adjustments. That is essentially the basis of the sauce that we coat the pig's blood cake with. It's not traditional, but then again, trying to be, right? We're taking a very Taiwanese ingredient, pig's blood cake, and we're fusing it with something that I really like. That's like pretty New York.
I'm pretty sure if I continue making this for the next 20 years or so, it could probably become a tradition as well. How do you even label a cuisine that's barely a century old a heritage?
I would say for Taiwanese cuisine to be taken seriously as a cuisine has probably only happened in the last 30 years or so. And I think it can be tied to political changes in Taiwan.
There isn't anything called Taiwanese cuisine, not until the first democratically elected Taiwanese president to bring Taiwanese 小吃 onto the table as to express an identity.
Talking about politics behind Taiwanese cuisine can be a little bit heavy. I'd rather explore what having such a young food heritage means for cooks like myself. After all, I see tradition as just things that we love and will carry with us across the times. So what does this taste of tradition mean for us Taiwanese today? Now the question is, what were the dishes that Taiwanese people actually used to eat? Records tell us that the first ever magazine feature on the island's cuisine came from the Japanese in the early 1900s. The criticism is that, much like the Michelin Guide, the feature only really focused on food that the colonial Japanese liked to eat, so rich people food. The rest of the island was actually pretty damn poor. So what about the locals?
During those days, locals probably just eat sweet potato with I wouldn't think stir fries a lot because you need oil. Oil is probably quite expensive.
What most people ate here would be defined with a few words: seasonal, local, and somewhat protein deficient.
The Taiwanese, they have no access to good rice. One of the reasons is because towards the end of the Japanese colonial, there will be the World War II coming, starting from maybe 1939, it started to have war atmosphere. So the good rice would have been preserved for Japanese soldiers and of course for rich people.
Then after World War II, as Taiwan became more industrialized and you had a lot more food imports, driven mostly by Taiwan's relationship with the USA, people, I think, began to enjoy whatever was available to them.
All right, so with that in mind, I decided to look out for festival foods that really bring out the extravagance. And there's really nothing more splurge-worthy for us Taiwanese people than a wedding. I follow a lead to a traditional banquet feast maker in Kaohsiung, the south of Taiwan.
Eric， 你好，我以前叫 Eric。
哦，是吗？太改名了。
现在叫上，
算，太改那个 OK。
这是我太太，这个好了，
哦，没有，谢谢。没有，你们真的太屌了。We're in this place where this used to be a sugar factory, and then they've converted it into like an event space. We're here for Bando, a Taiwanese moving banquet. The only thing I understand about Bando is that you have to get up early. I've been up since 1 in the morning, just getting down here. But another thing about Bando is, I know that it's super traditional. It's passed on through generations. In Taiwanese, Bando means literally making tables. So you're bringing your own tables, you're bringing your own chairs, you're bringing your own plates, you're bringing your own food. Wherever the couple decides to have the wedding, the caterer comes to the site. That is unbelievably cool to me.
OK 了，肉丝，对，里脊，然后我们可以腌过之后啊，我们还有那个鱼浆，然后跟它一起混，然后你吃下去的那个口感里面，因为你一般如果是鱼浆，它咬下去就是那个口感，但是它这个会比较扎实，就是比较弹，比较脆。
所以你就是一条一条，然后和泥浆。
对，鱼浆是搅碎的，它这个不是搅碎。
OK， 所以更多口感。
对。
OK. So it's fish paste. I think what's really special about this is that they put shredded pork loin in it. So it's a hybrid of fish paste and pork. In the streets, it's usually just fish paste. So it's a very straightforward and singular texture. But this, you get shreds of pork with your bouncy fish paste. It's a much more diverse texture, not even mentioning flavor, right? They marinated the pork in kind of your usual suspects.
哦，你闻我们的胡椒。
这是你们自己的，
我们都是在那个100年的中药房去用的胡椒，就是一般外面你市售的胡椒啊，买得到胡椒，闻起来很呛，可是其实入菜啊，我爆香过去，它出来的那个味道其实不够，因为他们都有一点调和。
你这有掺东西吗？还是
这是里面都是全部汉方的药材。
OK， 对，所以就是不止白胡椒，
对，不止白胡椒。这个给你带回去。
谢谢。这里面没有盐嘛，对不对？
没有盐。
This is their custom blend white pepper and a bunch of Chinese herbs and spices. No salt added, which is interesting. Because for Wen and 886, all of our white pepper blends have salt and MSG added. But because this is probably only one of their building blocks in terms of flavors, they can't have salt because they're adding so much other stuff. I'm learning. They are literally creating each dish from scratch the morning of. They're serving 180 people today. And this is considered a relatively small to mid-sized wedding. But I'm curious to see how they scale each dish, right? We got to see chicken soup. We're going to see youfan. Youfan literally means oil rice. So the technique is to have sticky rice coated with oil. The oil also has a bunch of seasoning, right? And that really depends on your personal taste and what your family recipe is. But it's mostly soy sauce, soy paste, oyster sauce, some type of pork, whether it be smoked or unsmoked, mushrooms. Youfan is the one thing that is going to be the most difficult because it's such a technical dish. It is so goddamn technical. We fail at it 50% of the time, right? So that's something I'm really curious to see.
就是先泡水嘛，然后这边现场蒸，这是还是生的。
你大概泡3个小时左右。
就早上来4点多5点开始泡，然后现在应该7点多吧，7点多差不多，然后等下会去蒸，然后就蒸完之后，我们会用那个高汤下去淋那个，再让它蒸，所以它待会里面米粒会有大骨汤的香气。
了解。
对，然后再下去一起炒。
OK。我真的已经学到好多东西，真的。
这个都是老祖宗的智慧。
他们也是一代一代这样传。
对，因为老一辈以前台湾很穷嘛，所以很多东西他们都舍不得丢掉，
所以就要一直废物利用。
对，就是变成让它变得加分。
真的，全世界我发现最好吃的食物都是因为废物利用，都是因为贫穷，
对，才会
必须要绞尽脑汁去去用很有创意的方法来把它变好吃。
像以前我们蒸那个米饭，不是会有锅巴嘛？锅巴老一辈的他们就会拿来撒糖，然后就变那个就有点像饼干那样，对，那都是零水，
锅巴脆，
有时候的虾米，然后那个香菇，然后香菇有炸过，然后鱿鱼，OK， 对，看得晒，传统
调味，
对。算是朋友自己养的猪，他的早餐是吃那个芭乐，
这么嗨，
然后晚餐是吃那个酒糟，然后和面给他吃，所以他就
猪不会喝醉，
不会，就是他这样子练出来的那个猪油会不会有腥味，对，
你外面身体里头去腥味，
对，它就是我们叫酒糟黑猪肉，
天啊，好香哦！
还没哦，
米酒的甜味整个出来，
对，还没，所以待会要先放。
所以你当初，开始做板豆到你可以自己一个人像今天这样长出，花了多久？听说你是被骂出来的，
骂出来，3、4年。
OK，
对。
就是其实我们没有去算这个时间，就是直到，因为我爸爸他都会走到他炒的油饭那边那个大桶子，就挖一口来吃。如果你看到他会走回来挖第2口、第3口，就表示说，他觉得好吃，不是因为肚子饿啊什么之类的。因为老一辈的就是他们也很要求，爸爸也很要求，
很直接。
对，然后因为我们从小耳濡目染的习惯就是，你在看就是在学习。就像我看爸爸在工作，我虽然没有亲自去动手，但是他如果有做一个动作，我会把它记下来。原来那个是要这样弄的。然后下一次我就会说，那我帮你弄什么，你不用教我。我觉得现在的人好像欠缺用眼睛观察。
是太多不同的东西，让我们现代人就是分散注意力。
对，但是像我们在这边工作啊，就是有慧根的人，就是真的不需要跟他多讲什么。
It's like literally from their ancestors passed down by the mouth, not even by writing. It's just verbally. It's like, okay, like what we just saw, steaming the soup. The steam baskets, you want to wedge a little chopsticks there. You want to wedge a little chopstick there so that you can add water with ease instead of having to lift everything up and then adding more water. These are small things that you really just don't think of. And it's an accumulation of experience. 因为板豆是一个非常稀有的、非常传统的一个东西，但是你们现在在一个算是时代的交叉点，稍微变成流行传统的东西，有没有觉得说你们会需要在传统跟现代中间做一个拔河跟取舍？
就是食物就是传统，餐具、摆桌就是习俗。
就是我们希望客人吃到的就是传统的味道，只是我在视觉上看，因为不可避免就是现在的人是视觉的动物，他在还没有吃到你的菜之前，他在网络上看，他第一眼是用眼睛先看到，所以如果要迎合现在要在这个市场上能够走下去，第一个就是要先吸引人家愿意看。我们觉得，因为像半桌菜这种东西，它有些这些料理为什么这样做，它其实是有意义的、有故事、有典故的。为什么会这些是这些的组成啊？对，所以我们不太去动它。但可能老一辈大家对传统印象说，哦，半桌的味素放很重，味精味素放很重，我们就是不要，我们就是用比较就是以食材的靠碟的口味去带这道菜的味道，就我们还是尽量，因为大家现在都讲的健康嘛，对，然后所以我们会这个部分我们会做调整。
I gotta say, when they tell me that they're trying to preserve their grandma's taste and the tradition as much as possible and trying their best to not deviate the flavors, I don't think that's necessarily true. Because the fact is, everything that they're doing differently is innovation. Sun was telling me about how for the xiangsu ya, the crispy duck, they braise it and then they fry it twice. As compared to the old ways, they would fry it for longer than they braise it. Because back in the day, this dish used to be a dish that you would enjoy with drinks, so the duck would be a lot more tough. But he told me that in modern days, people like things to be a little bit more tender. And the things they insist on, right? The cleanliness, the fact that they do everything from scratch, on site, that's kind of a stubbornness that you don't see a lot, right? So this is their xiangsu ya. So they braise it in their proprietary blend of spices for about 3 hours, which is impressive because the meat is still very much intact. And then they fry it once, and then they fry it again to pick up. So the skin is crisp, but the meat is still tender. In English, it'd literally be called crispy, fragrant duck. Sprinkling a little pepper on top. I honestly feel like it probably doesn't need the pepper. It is so fragrant. It's interesting because you would think 3 hours of braising, it would be like fall off the bone tender. In Taiwanese cuisine, that's considered over braised, right? But this is perfectly done.
I started out this journey to prove a point. That for a cuisine as young as what we Taiwanese people have, the idea of authenticity really makes no sense. And that tradition is just what we make of the things we love so much and that will carry with us. This is something I saw in Natasha's restaurant in Dresden. And then I saw how other young chefs are not just cooking up memories of a family recipe, but also innovating them for the next generation. Yet my biggest takeaway is actually very personal. After all, it's hard to even want to create traditions if we don't realize what's truly important to ourselves.
The more I see in Taiwan, the more I realize how little I know. You know? When I opened 886 4 years ago, I had this notion of, hey, Taiwanese food is simple, right? I grew up eating it. I was such an innocent thing for me to think. And I really regret, as a kid, not exploring what Taiwan had to give. It's a wonderful and poetic place, and I spent it playing video games, I spent it going to the same restaurants, I spent it eating at McDonald's, I spent it going to the States to learn English, to play tennis. But if I just took 20% of my vacations in Taiwan and actually opened my eyes a little bit, my restaurants right now would be able to represent Taiwan so much better, right? We all know Taiwan has had its fair shares of controversies, but the thing is, food in Taiwan is pretty much the only common ground we can find between the 23 million people on this island, right? And over the past 2 weeks, because I learned so much about the history and the transitional periods and all these, whether coincidental, intentional, or enforced even, all these different elements has sort of molded Taiwanese cuisine to this very specific thing. And it's one aspect of our culture that every single Taiwanese person can cling on to.